Before we begin today's podcast, I would like to announce that I'll be attending the Mind Body Soul Expo on Saturday, September 4th in beautiful Saratoga Springs, New York. The event will be held at the Saratoga Springs Convention Center, 522 Broadway, in downtown Saratoga Springs, which is 30 minutes north of Albany, and admission is free to the public. Come see over 130 vendors, 16 lectures, and 8 free classes and workshops. Registration is not required, but if you would like to tell me you're coming, please let me know on my website. Go to vitalbioenergetics.com and click on workshops. I can't wait to see you there. And now for today's podcast.
Welcome to High Vibes. I'm your host, Bill G, with co-host Nina G. At High Vibes, we're looking into what it means to be a fourth-dimensional being in an ever-changing world. We hope that by listening to this podcast, you can feel a greater sense of peace and connection as we collectively raise our energetic vibration to the next level. And now for today's podcast. Hello and welcome to
High Vibes.
I'm Bill G and I'm here with Nina, and today we're finishing up our discussion on constructs, or at least the basis of the construct charts that we created. And today we're going to be talking about something a little more esoteric, which is the ancient ancestral constructs. So this takes a little bit of explanation here. So an ancient ancestral construct is a construct we bring into our lifetime from other lifetimes or from our family line.
Yeah, there are things that maybe there was a great aunt who was working through some stuff, had a really bad day or really bad month or bad 20 years.
Bad lifetime.
Yeah, bad lifetime. And although that rarely happens, there's always bright spots. But maybe there was a length of time or something particularly traumatic that happened. And maybe she died at that point, or maybe she died later, but never really worked through what had happened. Because she died, she left all of that stuff that hadn't been resolved onto the rest of the family line that was still alive for them to work through.
Yes. And actually within the SRT protocol, we call those inheritance programs. So these are programs that we put onto other people, especially children. Holy crap, children are sponges. When it comes in the 7 years of their lives, they just absorb any kind of programming that we happen to be going through. But that's not exactly what we're talking about here. We're not talking about imprint programs. We're talking about these are inheritance programs that go far deeper. So deep in the background are these programs or these constructs.
And like on our visible light charts that we have, they fall within the purple range because they're kind of like karma. They're so pervasive. They're so in the background that they become kind of like white noise, and we don't notice it anymore. And it becomes very, very normal for us to live these patterns out from day to day.
Right. And so what we have to do when we're doing the charts with somebody is we find out what these patterns are, and we work then to clear them. We go into the Akashic record and we say, this is what's here. We need to get rid of these things, or at least bring them into conscious awareness, because right now they're sitting in the subconscious.
Yeah, and this can be really difficult because if you spend, especially like a lot of time around your family, they are probably also playing out these dramas, or at least some of them are. So by spending time with them, they kind of
It's what makes it normal, actually.
Yeah, it's what makes it normal, right?
Yeah.
And what makes a family drama normal. But it also kind of solidifies that you should be playing that out too, because you're seeing it all the time.
Right. So right before the podcast, we decided that we're just going to take a look at ourselves here and use ourselves as the case study example, because it went so well in the last podcast.
Yeah, we're having so much fun just ripping ourselves to shreds.
Right.
Here online.
Here online for everybody to see. So what we did with the chart is I first looked at myself, and then we looked at Nina, and we picked what we consider our primary ancestral construct and a secondary ancestral construct. So I'll go first, since I love to self-deprecate. Inability to find joy was the construct here, and wow.
In the last podcast, we were just talking about how Bill's family may see him as being kind of this silly, foolish little boy running around just doing silly, foolish things. And that could be construed as joy. You know, children are masters of joy and play. And maybe what Bill's family sees is him just kind of playing and not being real serious. So maybe, you know, the if you're looking at this as part of a clearing session, maybe you could see this as his family line. There was something that happened in his family line, or a series of things that happened, maybe generations of something, where that family really put emphasis on work and being successful, or at least accomplishing something, over joy, because maybe joy was inaccessible.
Yeah, and also they don't see work as being joyful. They see that you don't work to do something that you love. You work in order to build a legacy, in order to care for your family. Your joy is in your family, not in your work.
And this goes well along the lines of the businessman. And you had this attitude for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the day we walked in the door coming home from being married, it's like you changed. And you became that businessman who was really didn't care about joy or happiness or fun anymore, because that's what we were before then.
Oh, yeah,
but
before
now,
we got married, we had so much fun.
Oh, my gosh. You were amazing. And, you know, I come from fun. So, you know, I loved all that. But then it's like we came home, and now we had to get down to business of running a household and having a job and being successful and creating that family, and we had to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God. And that resulted in so many mistakes.
And problems.
I mean, you know, we
and stress.
Yeah, like back in 2002, we bought a house that we really, really shouldn't have bought. And because, you know, right in the middle of the closing, I lost my job. And so we closed on a house, and I had no job, no means of supporting it. But, you know, that's what you do. You get a house, and you work it out, and you scrimp and save and all that crap.
Okay, so then we were looking at me.
Mm-hmm.
And mine came up to be separation from source. And I can totally see why this is a major construct that I had, because I spent the majority of my life not being terribly well. Although I was well. Like, people didn't know what was wrong with me. I was just apparently just pushing the energy of physical badness through my body so I can understand. And it was the beginning of me having a life of trying to find source again. I've spent my whole life researching...
Or just trying to find God.
Yeah, I spent my whole lifetime just researching spirituality and what that meant. It was so very, very important that I do that.
And this definitely comes from your family, too, because your mother is very religious, and your grandmother was very religious. And so, you know, for them, going to church was extremely important. You never missed a Sunday, or you have to be deathly ill in order to miss a Sunday.
And I never really bought into any of that. I've never been a terribly religious person at all. But the spirituality part of it was really what was interesting and important for me to learn. And ever since I was 4 years old, like, this became very, very much an imperative for me.
So what do we think happened in your deep family line that would create this source separation paradigm coming in?
Well, maybe my family line was heavily involved in things that were not from source. Like, maybe secret societies.
Oh.
It could have also been that my family saw an awful lot of trauma, like really devastating trauma, atrocity, where maybe they didn't believe anymore that there was any good in the world.
Oh.
So that trauma just kind of filtered down the line, and I have now this kind of belief that there is nothing out there. But like I said, ever since I was 4, it was really, really important that I find it, because obviously somewhere in me I do feel like it is there.
Yeah. And we do know some about quite a bit about our family line, because you did the genealogy project
Yes.
for both of our families. And so, with this inability to find joy here actually makes a lot of sense for me, given my family background, because they were early colonists in the first wave of colonists, and then they went on the Oregon Trail and part of that manifest destiny whole thing, and there's not a whole lot of joy in that, because
No,
being
it's all about kind of conquest.
and fear and that kind of thing. It's there's no joy in that.
And my family line, well, on my father's side, absolutely followed a very similar line to yours, in that they were given land by the King of France and came and helped to colonize Quebec. Or was it?
Yeah, it was Quebec.
It was
Right.
Quebec. Okay. And then on my mother's side, they knew well in advance that World War II was coming, and that the Nazis were coming, and they saw it kind of infiltrating into their lives in a very small way. And my great-grandfather decided to move everyone out of Germany slowly, or out of Austria slowly. So obviously they had some sort of connection in order to know what was happening, or they were just really astute people to see what was happening.
Yeah, and somebody who's got a very strong connection to source has a strong connection to themselves and their and where they are in their own bodies.
Yeah, and how they feel about things, and what they feel as though they need to do.
And being forced to abandon that could also lead to a separation of that, because they had to move into a new land and move a new area in order to escape persecution that was definitely coming.
And they were, on my mother's side, they were very wealthy. And when they came here, they spent everything they had in order just to live and to integrate. And they lost everything.
Right.
So it was...
Because they had to leave everything behind.
Yeah,
pretty much everything behind.
Yeah, it was pretty devastating.
All their land, all their investments,
All
everything.
their family.
Right.
You know.
These are deep-seated things that
play out,
and they've become such a part of me, part of you, part of me, a part of all of us, that we live out every day. So, like, for me, this inability to find joy, it was a real struggle for me to say, wait a second, I am getting out of the corporate world. I am going to pursue something that actually makes me happy. And during those first years, I found every way possible to make it miserable for myself.
Yes, you did.
I became this, I joined this nonprofit on the board of directors, which...
You did a lot of things which kind of mimicked an office job in order for you to feel as though you were still doing that, because when you start a business, it can be a little hazardous, and you don't know what's coming. You've stepped into the unknown, and I think that was really uncomfortable for you. So you tried to make it into more of the businessman job, know, where you could feel comfortable and feel like you were giving something and getting something back, where your self-worth could still be elevated.
Right. And so I needed that crisis. I needed to help a company in crisis.
But you're over that now.
Oh, I am certainly over that right now, because our company is not in crisis. We're just having fun now.
We did some secondary ancient ancestral constructs, because we don't all just have one. We're very complicated beings. Humans are. So yours came up to be death space programming. Death space, the term is from Oracle Girl, who we love very much, oraclegirl.com.
Yes.
She's really amazing.
.org, actually.
Sorry. We will put it in the notes. She's an amazing person. If you haven't found her yet, she's really kind of changed both of our the way we look at life. So desk-based programming is the kind of in our concept of it, it's kind of the idea that everything moves toward entropy. Everything falls apart. Everything comes from a place of lack.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's definitely how I've approached a great deal of my life. My gosh, I've always been struggling against being poor and what that means to be poor. I never saw myself as someone who had abundance. I always saw myself as from how I grew up to how I lived the first 20 years of our lives. I always approached it as this, something that I needed to constantly struggle against.
And that desk-based programming really fed into your inability to find joy because it was not a joyous thing. If everything is falling apart, then no creation is made. Every time you strive to do something and start a project, that is creation, but it would quickly fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have to do something else in order to regain any scrap of what was gained previously.
Right. And in the few jobs that I did find joy, if I was happy in, I didn't have a problem with that. But if I didn't like the job for whatever reason, that was another thing. The self-sabotage, finding ways to get myself fired or put myself into the line of fire.
Again, more entropy.
Yeah. It's just, and then it wasn't again until I decided, made a choice that I was going to choose growth, choose life, that death space programming I could get over and clear. But again, it takes work. It's something that you need to bring into conscious awareness, but it's also something that you have to constantly work at. It's not like we can just wave the pendulum and it instantly goes away. It's something that we just have to be aware of so that way we can make choices to rise above it.
Paramahansa Yogananda used to talk about volition, which is intention paired with action. You can do the whole law of attraction thing and think, wow, this is what I really want. But if you don't actively go out and do something about it, it's hard for it to kind of pop into your life in any sort of real way.
Right. And so for you, your secondary was the misuse of intention. So that goes very well with that separation from source, because again, it's I am intending on doing something, and then it falls apart.
Yeah. Again, more entropy, right?
Mm-hmm. And so, and a good example of that, it just in our life was you had a habit of starting projects and then never finishing them or not seeing them through, or they're really fabulous in the beginning and then...
Yeah, I had great ideas because I'm a very creative person, but then I couldn't put that out onto the paper or into the world.
Right. And also it was coupled with this separation, this not knowing where your joy was, or not knowing where your center point was.
Yeah, so I always start projects thinking that, wow, this is so very interesting. Maybe it's something that would bring me closer to my own real self.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing ever really could do that for me. And I found that out in the middle.
Right. And we had a couple of failed businesses as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we put all this energy into starting the business and have a lot of fun in the beginning, but then, there was something missing. It wasn't really, there was no joy in it. There was no fulfillment in it. And then just,
yeah.
Plop.
I think because, we were just talking about archetypes. I played the maiden, so I was always trying to find something. I was always trying to find myself. I always kind of did what everyone told me to do, and I never really knew what I wanted to do, and I couldn't figure that out for myself for a really long time. So I was trying a whole lot of different things in order to really kind of discover who I was in all of that, and get out of my own box and get out of my own way, so that I could really be my more authentic self. And I always took my cues from everyone around me and what their interests were and what they expected of me, which never brought me any joy at all. It was only when I finally decided to be me, which, is weird. And I don't necessarily fit in to a lot of people's groups in the way that I think. But once I kind of embraced all that, I just had to say, well, to heck with all that. People will find me, and I will find people that I fit with by just being myself. And now my work is super joyous, and it truly encompasses all of my gifts. Whereas before, wow, I was, again, just lost.
Right. And again, this death space programming and the misuse of intention comes from our ancestors, our family lines and whatever, because we can definitely look back at my family line with the death space programming and just see that their whole existence was life, death, lack, don't have enough, whatever. And that was from the time they were pioneers, even further back, throughout recorded history, it has been it's a constant struggle of life and death. And so it makes sense that would be part of my programming here.
And I think from my family line, definitely the misuse of intention could be starting on projects out of fear, running from something, having this intention that this is going to make a better life or something. But then in the end, it turned out that it was just more running. So it never really brought any fruit that was worthwhile.
And even the family that came over where they got land from the King of France and whatever, I mean,
they ended up being incredibly poor farmers working in factories.
Right. And
live in very depressed places still.
And they came from nobility.
They came from nobility, for goodness sakes.
Right. And so what happened? What happened was, it could be when they first even came over here, the king was just trying to get rid of them.
It could be. Maybe they were too meddlesome.
Mm-hmm. We don't know because, there aren't any records from back then.
Or maybe they thought they were going to make a better life, but maybe it was all about power at the time. And, that always falls apart at the end. Yeah,
because, life in the early colonial period was hard.
Oh, goodness.
It was freaking hard. They were totally unprepared for this sort of thing. So they came in with the intention that they were going to build a new France or live their old lives again. And it completely fell apart.
So I think what I really get out of looking at this stuff is, if there are things in your life that you just don't want to tolerate, that you can't tolerate, but you do.
Yeah.
And I use the word tolerate because it is such a great word to describe the feeling of this. Those are the things, those are the constructs that, whether you can find them in your family line or just within your own life line, of just your own experience, those are the things that you really need to look at about, pushing off to the side or maybe pushing out completely and bringing in something that resonates more with you or brings you more joy, because those are really the things that help you create you, as opposed to help you create this image of you that others have.
I do not tolerate not being able to find joy. I do not tolerate this feeling of lack, this constant march towards death. That is, no, I do not accept that.
And even in your own relationships, if there's an aspect that you're like, wow, I really hate this. It's small. Maybe it's big, but it could be tiny, and you kind of stick it to the side there and not really look at it too often. That's something that actually can be worked on, where you can figure out, hey, I really don't want this anymore. What can I do to change it?
And so if you want to go through this process yourself, trying to figure out what is your ancient ancestral construct that you can clear, we can do that through the charts and whatever, please go to vitalbioenergetics.com/book
online
and book your free 30-minute consultation, and we can talk about what you are wanting to clear, or what are the
stuff
constructs
you won't want to tolerate anymore.
I don't want to tolerate that anymore, and I want that cleared out. So give us a talk, and we'll set you up, and we'll get this cleared out, and we'll also give you some proactive steps in order to just own that. Keep going, keep growing, keep finding that that light space within you to raise your consciousness levels. This is incredibly fun work, and I love doing this with people. Knowing that, so it was great talking to you guys, and we will see you in the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. For more information about Bill and Nina G, please visit our website at www.vitalbioenergetics.com. See you next time. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. For more information about Bill and Nina G, please visit our website at www.vitalbioenergetics.com. See you next time.